Imagine standing before a man who towers over you at an astounding 9 feet, 9 inches tall. A warrior, a champion forged in the fires of battle and fully equipped for one purpose: destruction. This man was Goliath of Gath, a fearsome Philistine giant whose very name struck terror into the hearts of his enemies. But was he merely a man? Or was he something more? A being of such immense power and size that many believed he carried a dark, otherworldly essence? Let's set the scene. The armies of Israel and Philistia are camped on 2 opposing hills, with a valley in between. It's dawn, and the first rays of sunlight gleam off a massive figure advancing from the Philistine side. Every footstep echoes through the valley as Goliath, clad in shimmering bronze armor from head to toe, makes his way forward. The earth seems to tremble beneath him. His helmet, forged from solid bronze, glints in the sunlight, and he wears a heavy coat of mail, each piece meticulously crafted to guard his massive frame. His armor alone weighed close to 125 pounds, a weight that could crush an ordinary man. And his legs are protected by bronze greaves, extending his defense down to his feet. Who would dare approach such a beast in combat? And then, there's his weaponry. Goliath's spear, with its thick, heavy shaft, is more like a beam than a weapon meant for annihilation, not just defeat. The spearhead alone weighs around 15 pounds. Can you imagine that? A spear so massive that just its tip weighs more than most of us can lift with ease. By Goliath's side, an armor-bearer carries his shield, but even this aid seems insignificant in the presence of such a towering, deadly force. For 40 days, Goliath would come out at dawn and again at dusk, pacing back and forth, issuing his chilling challenge to Israel. "Choose a man and have him come down to me," he'd roar, his voice echoing off the cliffs. It wasn't just a battle cry, it was a declaration, a demand that only the bravest or most foolish would even consider answering. Every day, Israel's warriors stood frozen, staring in disbelief. Who could face a giant who seemed almost invincible, shielded not just by his armor but by his supreme confidence? But why did Goliath issue this challenge? Was it just about defeating Israel's best warrior? Or was there something deeper, something symbolic behind this single combat ritual? In ancient times, champions often fought one-on-one as representatives of their armies, each warrior's victory signifying the triumph of his people, his gods, and his culture. By challenging Israel to send a lone fighter, Goliath wasn't just taunting them. He was mocking the very God of Israel, daring anyone to step forward and prove that their God could stand against the gods of the Philistines. Yet, as he boasted and ridiculed, a sense of dread spread through Israel's camp, gripping the hearts of even the most battle-hardened soldiers. Would anyone have the courage to face this giant? Or would Israel's people succumb to the fear of the impossible, admitting defeat without ever raising a weapon? But wait, why does Goliath possess such tremendous size and strength? Could he be one of the legendary Nephilim, the giants said to be born from human and divine unions, beings whose presence was a sign of supernatural judgment? Or was he part of an ancient race known as the Rephaim or the Anakim, descendants of the mighty giants who roamed the land in ancient times? As legends whispered through Israel's camp, Goliath's stature became not only a physical threat, but a spiritual and psychological terror. As we picture this scene, let's not rush past the magnitude of this moment. Let's linger here, feeling the weight of Goliath's challenge, the tension in the air as he stands defiantly, armed to the teeth, daring anyone to come near. And let's remember, every battle has 2 sides, and not all warriors wield swords. What if there was someone out there who could confront Goliath, not with brute strength but with a weapon far more powerful? But who could possibly stand against a force like this? What kind of courage would it take to face Goliath? And more importantly, what kind of faith? For 40 long days, Goliath's figure loomed over the valley each morning and evening, a relentless reminder of Israel's deepest fears. But this wasn't merely about brute force. Goliath had a strategy, a psychological tactic that was as deadly as his spear. Twice a day, he would march down to the valley and taunt the Israelite camp, issuing a challenge that seemed impossible to meet. He wasn't just looking for a fight. He was seeking to shatter their morale, to cripple them with fear before the battle even began. Goliath's challenge to Israel was deceptively simple. He proposed a duel, a one-on-one combat where the victor's side would claim total victory. No need for bloodshed among thousands, just one fight to determine the fate of an entire nation. But why would a seasoned warrior like Goliath want a single combat? Was it arrogance? Or was it part of a calculated ploy to break Israel's spirit? One-on-one duels were common in ancient warfare, especially among cultures where victory wasn't only about skill, but also about a show of superiority, of gods, culture, and destiny. Goliath, towering over any potential rival, knew he held a distinct advantage. He wasn't looking for a fair fight. He was looking for a show, a spectacle that would humiliate Israel and undermine their faith in their God. Imagine the scene. Every day, Goliath's booming voice echoes through the valley as he taunts the Israelite soldiers. "Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man and let him come down to me." His words carried weight, seething with disdain. He made sure everyone knew he wasn't just challenging Israel, he was challenging their God. This wasn't just a test of strength but a declaration, a wager between gods. So why did he repeat this ritual every morning and evening? Because Goliath wasn't just interested in a fight. He was interested in breaking them down slowly. His daily appearance was like a curse, a reminder to the Israelite camp of their own helplessness. Day after day, the Israelites woke up and went to sleep with the same taunting question hanging in the air. Is there no one brave enough to face him? As the days wore on, the taunts grew sharper, and Israel's silence only deepened the sense of impending doom. With each passing hour, Goliath seemed invincible, not because he was unconquerable, but because his confidence was infectious. He embodied the Philistine army's arrogance, making Israel's own warriors feel small, insignificant, unworthy. But here's the twist. What if this relentless intimidation was all part of a plan, one that Goliath could never have foreseen? What if, amid Israel's fear, someone unexpected was beginning to question the giant's dominance, someone who saw through the illusion of Goliath's power? What if, even in this sea of terror, there was a quiet defiance building in the heart of a young shepherd, a defiance that would not only challenge Goliath but defy the very laws of warfare? Goliath had underestimated something far more powerful than his size or skill. But who could possibly possess the courage to step forward? And what kind of power would they bring into the showdown that Goliath, in all his arrogance, could never predict? Now picture the Israelite camp, tense and weighed down by fear. For 40 days, Goliath's thunderous voice has shattered the morning silence and echoed through the valley at dusk. Each taunt is a fresh reminder of Israel's helplessness, a slow, grinding humiliation. But on this particular day, there's an unexpected visitor. David, the youngest son of Jesse, a young shepherd from Bethlehem. David wasn't a soldier. He hadn't come for war. In fact, he was simply running an errand, bringing food supplies for his older brothers who served in Saul's army. He arrives with bread and cheese, probably expecting a simple task, a quick greeting, and then to return home. Yet, as he steps into the camp, he senses the tension in the air. Men, seasoned soldiers, are standing with grim faces, avoiding eye contact, their eyes cast toward the valley where Goliath's shadow looms large. But something ignites within David, a curiosity, maybe even a righteous anger, as he hears the faint sound of the giant's voice echoing through the valley. And then David sees him. Goliath, this towering figure covered in bronze armor, is strutting back and forth, mocking not just the Israelite army but their very identity. To Goliath, they are nothing more than servants of Saul, mere men cowering at the feet of a true warrior. Yet David sees something else. He sees a man who is insulting not just an army, but the God of Israel himself. And that's something David cannot ignore. As David listens, his blood boils. How dare this Philistine defy the armies of the living God? How dare he mock the name of the Lord? David, a young shepherd who had spent countless hours tending sheep, watching the stars, and praying to his God, couldn't believe his ears. Where others heard a terrifying threat, David heard something different, a challenge. He saw Goliath's words as an affront, not just to Israel, but to the God who had been his shepherd, his guide, his protector in the wilderness. David begins asking questions, and his boldness shocks those around him. He's asking, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? His brothers scold him, accusing him of arrogance and recklessness, warning him to stay silent and keep his head down. After all, what could a shepherd boy possibly know about war, about battle, about the terror of facing such a giant? But David's confidence wasn't rooted in naivety or youthful arrogance. It was rooted in something deeper. Unlike the soldiers, David had already seen the power of God at work in his life. He remembered his days in the field, when wild beasts had attacked his flock. Lions and bears, far stronger and deadlier than any human opponent, had tried to tear his sheep apart. Yet David had fought them off with his bare hands, protecting his flock by the strength he believed God had given him. If God had been with him in those moments, if God had given him victory over beasts that seemed far more powerful than him, then why would this Philistine be any different? Word of David's questioning spreads quickly, reaching the ears of King Saul himself. And soon, David finds himself standing before the king, insisting that he be the one to face Goliath. Saul is skeptical. How could a boy, untrained in battle, hope to stand against a giant? But David's conviction is unwavering. He speaks with a confidence, a faith that goes beyond mere words. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine, he declares. As Saul listens, he hears something he hasn't heard in 40 days. A spark of hope, a glimmer of courage that cuts through the despair hanging over the camp. And Saul, perhaps driven by desperation or perhaps sensing something extraordinary in David's words, allows him to go. Imagine the scene. A young shepherd boy, armed not with armor or a sword but with faith in the God who had never failed him, walking toward a battlefield where even seasoned warriors feared to tread. As David steps out of the camp, he's not just stepping onto a battlefield. He's stepping into history, a story that would be told for generations. Could it be that this young shepherd, unassuming and underestimated, was the very answer to Israel's prayers? Could it be that, in David's arrival, God was revealing a powerful truth, that sometimes the most unexpected, the most ordinary among us are called to do the extraordinary? As David approaches the valley, he knows one thing for sure: he is not alone. The God who delivered him before is with him now. But what will happen when he finally stands before the giant? How will the shepherd boy from Bethlehem face the most feared warrior in the land? The stage is set, the players are in place, and the outcome will be nothing short of miraculous. As David steps into the valley, his courage shines in a way no armor could ever display. This wasn't the bravery of a warrior trained in combat or a soldier hardened by years of battle. No, David's courage was something purer, born from a faith unbreakable, a trust that was stronger than any weapon or shield. It was the courage of a shepherd who had faced the wilderness and believed that, through God, he was never alone. Standing before King Saul, David recounts moments in his life that seemed impossible, moments where his life and his flock had been on the line. "I faced lions and bears," he says, his voice steady, "and God delivered me from their claws and jaws. Every time a lion threatened his sheep, every time a bear came prowling in the dead of night, David stood firm, wielding nothing more than a shepherd's staff, his sling, and his trust in God. And each time, he walked away victorious, untouched by fear. But this wasn't merely about physical strength or skills with a sling. David's true weapon was his unwavering belief that God was his protector, his ever-present guide. When everyone else saw a giant too big to fight, David saw a foe too weak to defy the living God. His courage was different. It was fierce, it was resolute, and it was humble. David wasn't standing up to Goliath to prove himself. He was standing up to honor the God who had always been with him, a God whose name Goliath had defiled. Imagine the whispers and doubts of those around him. Soldiers sneered, probably calling him reckless, foolish, even mad. They had spent their lives in armor, with training in the art of war, and yet here was a shepherd boy daring to walk out to the battlefield alone. His brothers chastised him, accusing him of pride and arrogance. Yet David, undeterred, holds firm. His courage wasn't swayed by the opinions of others. It was deeply rooted, anchored in the certainty of God's faithfulness. As he prepares to face Goliath, Saul offers him armor. Shining, polished, protective armor that had likely been forged for a king. But David, with a quiet confidence, declines. The armor felt foreign, heavy, restrictive, a reminder of fighting on human terms. David understood something profound. He wasn't going into this battle by human strength or strategy. He was going in the name of the Lord, just as he was. Armor or no armor, he believed the battle was already won by faith alone. So, David walks out into the valley with nothing but his staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones. 5 small stones against a 9-foot giant covered head to toe in bronze. 5 stones, each one a symbol of his trust in God. Each one a reminder of the countless times God had shown up for him. He wasn't intimidated by Goliath's size or his weaponry. David's courage came from knowing that he fought for something far greater than himself. In this moment, David stands not only as a young shepherd but as a testament to the power of faith and courage. His courage wasn't just about facing a giant. It was about defying a belief that the enemy was invincible. His courage declared that, against all odds, the God of Israel was greater than any giant, greater than any fear, and greater than any threat. With every step, David moves closer to Goliath, the Philistine army watching in amusement, Israel's soldiers looking on in disbelief. His heart races, but his faith remains steady, unshaken. David is here to show that courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means facing that fear with faith as strong as stone. And so he stands before Goliath, a shepherd against a warrior, a boy against a giant. David doesn't see a terrifying opponent. He sees a defeated one. And with a voice as steady as his heart, he speaks. "You come to me with sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord Almighty." David's courage is unbreakable, a reminder that true strength lies not in size or weapons, but in a heart that knows its purpose. Will David's courage be enough? Will his faith hold steady in the face of overwhelming odds? With nothing but his sling and his belief in a God who never fails, David stands ready to take on the impossible. And in this defining moment, his courage will not only change the course of a battle, but will forever echo as a testament to the power of faith over fear. As David steps closer to the battlefield, the air feels heavy with anticipation. His youth and humble attire seem almost absurd against the towering figure of Goliath, a seasoned giant armored in bronze from head to toe. King Saul, watching this young shepherd ready to face the fiercest Philistine warrior, feels a swell of concern. He calls David over and, with a sense of urgency, offers him his own armor, a royal set, crafted for a king and designed to endure the brutal strikes of war. At first, David accepts the armor, slipping it on piece by piece. The breastplate, the helmet, the greaves, all heavy, all foreign. Saul's armor was built for someone of a different stature, both physically and symbolically. David shifts uncomfortably, the weight of the armor slowing him down, restricting his movement. How could he fight with this unfamiliar burden? His spirit was ready, but his body was encumbered by armor meant for someone else, for a battle style that wasn't his own. And then, with calm determination, David decides to set the armor aside. It was a bold decision, one that must have raised eyebrows, perhaps even elicited laughter from those watching. Who was this young man to refuse the very armor of a king? Yet David knew something profound. Victory didn't depend on physical strength or the best armor. He understood that if he was to win, it would not be by might, nor by power, but by the Spirit of God. This battle would be fought in the way he knew best, with his faith, his skill, and his trust in God. David carefully selects 5 smooth stones from a nearby stream, each stone fitting perfectly in his hand, each one a reminder of the simplicity and humility of his approach. 5 stones, small, unassuming, but chosen with intention. He places them in his shepherd's bag, alongside his sling, his only weapon. The same sling he'd used countless times to protect his flock, the same sling that had brought down lions and bears. David knew that his sling and his faith were all he needed, tools that had proven trustworthy time and time again. Picture him now, standing alone at the edge of the battlefield, the shouts of soldiers around him, the sneers from the Philistine ranks. Yet, there's no hesitation in David. Every choice he's made so far, the refusal of armor, the selection of stones, reflects his unyielding faith. His mind and heart are focused, and as he looks at the giant before him, he feels the presence of the God of Israel. The preparation wasn't just about gathering weapons or armor. It was about aligning his heart with God's purpose. David's true preparation wasn't physical but spiritual, a readiness rooted in trust. As he tightens his grip on the sling, he doesn't see himself as defenseless. He sees himself as a servant on a divine mission. His weapon isn't just a sling. It's his unwavering belief that God has already decided this battle's outcome. David stands there, armed only with his shepherd's tools, yet carrying a resolve that no armor could provide. He's ready, not because he's fearless, but because he knows who fights alongside him. David's preparation is complete, not through weapons of war, but through faith that his God is greater than any foe, no matter how mighty. And so, with his 5 stones, his sling, and a heart set on victory, David steps forward. He is ready to face Goliath, prepared to defy the impossible, all while bearing the humble confidence that God himself goes before him. Now, only one question remains. Will this simple shepherd's faith and preparation truly stand against a giant's fury? As the battle lines are drawn, the air is thick with tension. On one side, there stands Goliath, a towering figure of brute force and arrogance. His massive frame casts a shadow over the entire battlefield, his armor glinting menacingly under the sun. His voice, booming and confident, echoes across the valley as he mocks the Israelites, daring them to send out a champion to fight him in single combat. 40 days, 40 nights, he had issued this challenge, taunting the people of God, mocking their faith, their strength, their courage. On the other side, there stands David, a young shepherd, no more than a boy in the eyes of the world. His only armor is his faith, his only weapon a sling and 5 smooth stones. His heart beats steadily, not with fear, but with the unwavering confidence that the battle was already won. He doesn't need to look intimidating or carry the weight of a soldier's armor. What David has is something far more powerful, a trust in the living God. As David approaches the battlefield, Goliath's eyes lock onto him. The giant's laughter shakes the ground. "Am I a dog," he roars, "that you come at me with sticks?" The Philistine warrior sneers, contempt dripping from his words. He expects a battle of strength, of muscle, of weapons. He sees nothing but a boy with a slingshot, a fool who doesn't know his place. But David, unfazed by the insult, steps forward. He is not intimidated by Goliath's size, nor his fury. Instead, he calmly responds, his voice firm. "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David doesn't see a giant in front of him. He sees an enemy of God, someone who has dared to challenge the creator of the universe. David's words ring out with power, but it's not in his own strength that they find their authority. It's in the name of God. He declares that the battle isn't his. It belongs to the Lord. And with that declaration, David's focus sharpens, his confidence solidifies, and the battle takes on a new dimension. The stakes have just changed. This isn't just about a shepherd and a giant. It's about the sovereignty of God over all creation. Goliath, still brimming with confidence, moves forward, shaking his sword, ready to crush his opponent with a single blow. He's laughed at the sight of David, taunted the Israelites for weeks, but now, his rage is real. He's prepared for war, but he's not prepared for what's coming. David doesn't flinch. He takes his sling, expertly loading one of the 5 smooth stones into it. His fingers move with the precision of someone who's practiced this moment 1,000 times. With steady hands, he swings the sling, his body fluid and controlled. The stone begins to spin faster and faster, gaining speed with each rotation. Then, in one smooth motion, David releases the stone. It flies through the air with a force that defies its size. Goliath, so certain of his victory, doesn't even see it coming. The stone strikes him squarely in the forehead, sinking deep into his skin with a sickening thud. The giant staggers, his eyes wide in shock as the massive weight of his own arrogance crumbles before him. In a moment, he collapses to the ground, the earth shaking beneath his fall. Silence hangs in the air. The Philistine army stands frozen, unable to believe what they've just witnessed. Their mighty champion, the one who had mocked the God of Israel, lies defeated by a single stone. The Israelites, who had trembled at the sight of Goliath just moments before, now erupt in triumphant shouts. Their faith has been vindicated. Their God has proven his power. David stands over Goliath's fallen form, his chest heaving with the adrenaline of battle. He could have stopped there, but he doesn't. With a swift move, he draws Goliath's own sword, raising it high as he decapitates the giant, symbolizing the finality of the victory. David's strength wasn't in his skill with a sling, but in his faith in the Lord. God had delivered the giant into his hands, just as he had delivered the lion and the bear. The sight of Goliath's head, now a trophy in David's hands, sends shockwaves through the battlefield. The Philistine army, seeing their champion fallen, breaks in fear. They flee in terror, their hearts shattered, their morale crushed by the overwhelming power of the God of Israel. The Israelites, now emboldened, chase after them, securing a victory that seemed impossible just hours earlier. This wasn't just a victory for David. It was a victory for faith, for courage, for the power of God to work through those who trust in him. David, a humble shepherd, had defeated a giant not with sword or shield, but with the unshakable belief that the battle belonged to the Lord. As the dust begins to settle on the battlefield, the once imposing figure of Goliath lies lifeless in the dirt, his giant frame sprawled out like a fallen tree. The air is thick with disbelief, and the world seems to pause for a brief moment. The giant is no more. But what does this victory truly mean for Israel? What ripples will it send through the hearts of those who have been waiting for a sign of hope, a flicker of faith? The silence is broken by the sound of shouting, victorious cries from the Israelites who are witnessing a miracle unfold before their eyes. What seemed impossible only moments ago, David, a young shepherd boy, defeating a warrior more than twice his size, is now a reality. The impossible has been achieved, and God's power has been made manifest. But the victory isn't just about the defeat of one man. It's about the defeat of fear, the triumph of faith, and the undeniable proof that God fights for his people. David stands tall, but it's not just a physical stance. It's the weight of divine vindication that presses upon his shoulders. He holds Goliath's severed head in his hand, a trophy of the battle that will echo through the ages. The Israelites look upon David not just as a boy, but as a champion, a hero sent by God to deliver them from the terror that had loomed over them for so long. The Philistine army, once so confident, now flees in panic, their hearts gripped by a terror far greater than anything Goliath could instill in them. Their mighty warrior has fallen, and with him, their strength. The sight of Goliath's defeat sends shockwaves through the Philistine ranks, breaking their resolve, shattering their confidence, and sending them scattering like leaves before a storm. As the Israelites watch the Philistines retreat in disarray, their spirits are lifted. They had been paralyzed by fear, intimidated by Goliath's challenge, uncertain of their own strength. But now, in the wake of David's victory, they are emboldened. The victory is more than a military win. It's a spiritual awakening. They realize that with God on their side, no enemy, no matter how great, no matter how fearsome, is too powerful to overcome. The pursuit begins. The Israelites, now full of courage and conviction, charge after the fleeing Philistines. What had once seemed like a hopeless battle turns into a complete rout. The Philistines, broken and disheartened, are chased off the battlefield, their morale shattered beyond repair. The Israelites, inspired by David's faith, follow in his footsteps, pushing forward with unstoppable force. But the victory isn't just in the battlefield. The impact of what has just happened will resonate throughout the land of Israel. David, though young, has proven that faith in God is mightier than any weapon, any army, any giant. His courage has inspired a nation. His victory is a testament to the power of trusting in God when all seems lost. It is a reminder that, when we stand firm in faith, God will deliver us from even the most impossible situations. David's fame spreads quickly throughout Israel. He becomes not just a hero, but a symbol of hope. His name is on the lips of every Israelite as they recall how he defeated the giant. But David doesn't bask in the glory of his victory. He doesn't seek honor or praise for himself. Instead, he gives all the credit to God, knowing that it was the Lord who gave him the strength, the courage, and the victory. Meanwhile, King Saul and his men, who had stood by and watched the battle unfold, are now filled with awe. The young boy they once saw as nothing more than a shepherd has proven himself to be more than a soldier. He is a man of God, a leader, and a conqueror. The truth is undeniable. David is chosen for something greater than even Saul could imagine. In the aftermath of the battle, Israel's position is strengthened, but the true significance of David's victory goes beyond the immediate triumph. It marks the beginning of a new era for the nation. A time of restoration, a time of courage, and a time of faith. David's victory over Goliath is the spark that will ignite the flame of God's presence in Israel, the flame that will guide them to greater victories and greater faith in the days to come. And for David, the victory over Goliath is just the beginning. The God who delivered him from the giant will be with him in every battle to come. It is a reminder to David, and to us, that no matter how overwhelming the challenges may seem, when we place our trust in God, victory is always within reach. As the story of David and Goliath has echoed through the ages, one of the most intriguing and controversial aspects of this tale is the question: who exactly was Goliath? What if the giant that stood against Israel was not just any warrior, but someone or something far more ancient and terrifying? What if Goliath was a Nephilim? You may be wondering, what exactly is a Nephilim? And why is it so important to understanding Goliath's identity? Well, let's dive into this ancient mystery. The term Nephilim comes from a brief, cryptic passage in the Bible, Genesis 6 verse 4, that says, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." These mysterious beings are often described as the offspring of fallen angels and human women, giants of great size and strength, who were said to be both terrifying and mighty. The word Nephilim itself is derived from the Hebrew word NPL, which means to fall, implying that these beings were fallen ones, possibly cast out or cursed from the heavenly realm. Now, what does this have to do with Goliath? Some biblical scholars, theologians, and ancient historians have speculated that Goliath might have been a Nephilim, or at least descended from them. They point to his sheer size and strength as evidence that he was no ordinary human. After all, Goliath was a giant, standing at an imposing 9 feet 9 inches tall, towering over the average Israelite and even the mighty warriors of his time. But size alone doesn't explain the terror he inspired or the superhuman prowess he displayed on the battlefield. Could his size be linked to an ancient bloodline, one that harkens back to the Nephilim? Let's consider the biblical context. We know that Goliath was from Gath, one of the cities of the Philistines. But did you know that the Philistines were not just any ordinary people? They were believed to be descendants of the giants who lived in the land before Israel's conquest of Canaan. This connection to the ancient giants has led some to speculate that the Philistine giants, including Goliath, might be part of a long-lasting bloodline of Nephilim, living on in secret and terrorizing the Israelites. In fact, the Bible mentions other giants from Gath, such as the brothers of Goliath, who were similarly formidable and terrifying, leading some to believe that this bloodline was not just one of warriors, but of beings that were literally born of the union between divine and human, just like the Nephilim. But the theories about Goliath's true nature don't end there. Some scholars argue that the Nephilim were not just mythic figures from the distant past, but that they might have survived, in a sense, through generations. This line of thinking suggests that, while Goliath may not have been a literal fallen angel, he could have been a descendant of these ancient, hybrid beings, giants that carried the bloodline of something far older and darker than ordinary men. There is also a connection in the way Goliath is described. In the Bible, we read about Goliath's armor and weapons, his massive shield, his iron armor, and the spear with its deadly point. Everything about his appearance, his size, his equipment, his overwhelming presence, seems designed to instill fear in the hearts of those who witness him. Could this be another clue that Goliath was not merely a human warrior, but something of a more supernatural origin, perhaps a being of an ancient, almost cursed bloodline that had been made to dominate? It's important to note that these theories remain speculative. The Bible doesn't explicitly state that Goliath was a Nephilim, nor does it go into great detail about his ancestry. However, the connection is tantalizing, and it raises the question, was Goliath's defeat by David a victory over more than just a giant warrior? Could it have been a symbolic defeat of something far darker, an ancient evil that had haunted Israel for generations? The idea of Goliath being a Nephilim fits into a larger biblical narrative of giants, creatures who existed long before Israel's rise as a nation, beings who are often seen as enemies of God's people, constantly opposing them. And so, in this light, David's victory is more than just a moment of personal bravery. It could be seen as a divine battle, where God's power overcomes not only the earthly giants but the ancient, spiritual forces that sought to dominate his people. While the theories about Goliath's true nature as a Nephilim remain speculative, one thing is certain. David's victory over him marks a pivotal moment in biblical history, a moment where the might of man meets the power of God, and the impossible is made possible. Whether Goliath was a Nephilim, a warrior of legendary strength, or something else entirely, his defeat shows us a powerful lesson. No matter how great the enemy, with God on our side, giants can be defeated. As the story of David and Goliath unfolds, we often focus on the lone giant, the mighty Goliath who challenged the armies of Israel. But what if Goliath was not the only giant in his family? What if his brothers, and others like him, were lurking in the shadows, waiting for their own moment to strike fear into the hearts of God's people? It turns out that Goliath was not alone in his towering size and intimidating presence. According to Scripture, Goliath had brothers, and these brothers were just as formidable. In fact, the Bible hints that Goliath's family line may have been known for its monstrous strength and the legacy of giants that ran through their veins. In 2 Samuel 21 verses 18 to 22, we read about a series of battles between the Israelites and the descendants of the giants from Gath. These giants were no ordinary men. They were warriors of enormous stature, terrifying to behold, and deeply feared by Israel. Among them were Goliath's brothers, Ishbi-benob, Saph, and Lami, each of whom posed a great threat to Israel. Ishbi-benob, for example, was described as a giant who wielded a spear so heavy that it was like a weaver's beam. He nearly killed David in a fierce battle, but it was his nephew Abishai, a mighty warrior himself, who intervened and saved David's life. This victory didn't just protect David. It symbolized the continued struggle between Israel and these giants, who had been a threat ever since the days of Goliath. But who were these giants, really? Were they mere warriors, or could they have been part of the same mysterious race of giants known as the Nephilim? Some scholars believe that these giants, including Goliath's brothers, might have been descendants of the Nephilim, that ancient race of giants mentioned in Genesis 6, offspring of fallen angels and human women. These giants were believed to possess extraordinary strength, intimidating size, and a legacy of terror. And it wasn't just Goliath's brothers who were part of this giant bloodline. The Bible also speaks of other giants from Gath and other Philistine cities, each of them a formidable force, seemingly bred for war and destruction. One such giant was Lami, another warrior who was also defeated by David's mighty men. And then there was a giant who is described as having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, a truly bizarre and terrifying feature. These unusual traits further fuel the idea that the giants were not simply human, but possibly part of a supernatural lineage. These giants weren't just isolated threats, though. They were part of a larger network of giants who had lived in the region long before the Israelites set foot in the Promised Land. The giants' presence in the land was so well known that, even after Goliath's death, Israel continued to face these monstrous adversaries in battle. Their defeat of these giants wasn't just a matter of military strategy. It was a spiritual victory, a sign of God's power triumphing over forces that sought to intimidate and oppress his people. In fact, in 1 Chronicles 20, we find more references to these giants, showing that the struggle between Israel and these enormous enemies continued long after Goliath's death. It's almost as if the giants were a persistent threat, deeply embedded in the culture and history of the Philistines, a group whose history was marked by their presence. So, what do we make of all this? Are these giants simply a fascinating biblical curiosity? Or is there a deeper, more profound spiritual significance to their story? For one, these giants symbolize the seemingly insurmountable obstacles that we face in life. But they also serve as a reminder of God's power to overcome even the greatest of fears and threats. Just as David defeated Goliath and his brothers, so too can we, with faith in God, face and overcome the giants in our own lives, be they physical, emotional, or spiritual. These giants also remind us of the cosmic struggle between good and evil. Throughout the Bible, giants represent more than just physical strength. They often stand as symbols of oppression, pride, and the forces that oppose God's will. The Israelites' victory over these giants is not just a military victory. It's a victory of divine justice, where God's strength and righteousness prevail over the darkness and terror that the giants represent. And so, the story of Goliath's brothers and other giants is more than just an ancient tale of battle and bravery. It's a testament to the enduring struggle between the forces of good and evil, and a reminder that, no matter how overwhelming the giants in our lives may seem, God is always greater. As David and his men defeated the giants, so can we, with faith and courage, defeat the giants in our own world. Even after David's most famous victory over Goliath, the challenges he faced did not end. The victory over the mighty giant did not erase the constant threat posed by the Philistines, and soon, David found himself in the midst of another battle, this time with a giant much like the one he had previously defeated. This time, the giant's name was Ishbi-Benob. Ishbi-Benob was no ordinary man. He was a giant from the same line of monstrous warriors as Goliath, and like his predecessors, he had a reputation for being nearly unstoppable. In fact, the Bible describes him as a terrifying figure, armed with a heavy spear and wearing the kind of armor that could crush any opponent in its path. But what made Ishbi-Benob even more dangerous wasn't just his size or strength. It was his desire to avenge the death of his brother, Goliath. This battle is told in 2 Samuel 21 verses 18 to 22, and it paints a picture of just how vulnerable even the greatest warriors can become when their strength is tested by a greater power. As David grew older, his strength as a warrior began to wane, and the battles began to take a toll on his body. But despite his age, David's courage and determination never faltered. When Ishbi-Benob stepped onto the battlefield, looking to strike down the very heart of Israel's leadership, it was David who became the prime target. Ishbi-Benob, knowing David's fame as a warrior, set his sights on him, believing that by taking David down, he would strike a devastating blow to Israel. The giant's attack was swift and fierce, and in the thick of the battle, David found himself alone, facing the terrifying might of a foe far younger and stronger. The odds were stacked against David. The giant was ready to deliver the final blow, but David was not alone. In the darkest moment of David's life, when it seemed like his time had finally come, Abishai, David's loyal nephew, stepped in. Abishai, a mighty warrior in his own right, witnessed the danger David was in and rushed to his uncle's aid. With great courage, Abishai fought off Ishbi-Benob, saving David from the giant's attack and ensuring that David's life was spared. In the end, Ishbi-Benob was defeated, but not by David alone. This victory was a reminder of the strength that comes from unity, from standing together in the face of overwhelming odds. So, what is the spiritual significance of this battle? Why is it important that David faced another giant, even after having defeated Goliath? It shows us that the journey of faith and victory is not a one-time event, but a lifelong battle. Even after experiencing great triumphs, we will face new giants, new challenges that seek to defeat us. And sometimes, as in David's case, we may not have the strength to fight alone. But God, in His mercy and wisdom, provides support through others. Abishai's timely intervention reminds us of the importance of community and fellowship, and how God works through others to deliver us from our trials. David's battle with Ishbi-benob also serves as a reminder that the enemy is relentless. Even when we think we've overcome one obstacle, another one may appear, even greater than the last. Yet, this doesn't mean defeat. It means that with God's strength and the support of those around us, we can face anything that comes our way. David's victory over Ishbi-benob wasn't just about the defeat of a giant. It was a symbol of God's ongoing protection and faithfulness, reminding us that He is always there, providing what we need, even in our weakest moments. This battle teaches us resilience. It shows us that there will always be challenges ahead, but with God's strength and the strength of our spiritual family, we can continue to fight, continue to stand strong, and ultimately, continue to win. David's life wasn't marked by one victory, but by many battles, each one teaching him more about God's power and his own need for God's help. And so, just as David was saved by the courage and help of his nephew Abishai, we too are reminded that we don't face life's giants alone. God places people in our lives to help us, to fight alongside us, and to support us when we can no longer stand on our own. In the end, the defeat of Ishbi-benob was more than just a victory over a giant. It was a reminder that even in our weakest moments, God's power is made perfect, and He is always with us, even when the battle seems too great. As we reflect on the story of David and his battles, both with Goliath and later with giants like Ishbi-benob, we come to a profound realization. David's victories were not just about physical strength or battle strategy, but about his unwavering faith and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. David's life is a testament to the power of courage rooted in faith. From the moment he faced Goliath, a man who was more than a match for him in size and experience, David's actions demonstrated a faith that transcended human limitations. When everyone around him saw an impossible battle, David saw an opportunity for God's power to shine through. And it wasn't just Goliath. David's courage never faltered, even when he faced giants who sought to destroy him, or when he was on the brink of death. This is the kind of courage we're talking about. It's not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it, driven by the conviction that God's strength is greater than any obstacle. And it's important to remember that David wasn't facing these giants in his own strength. It was through his reliance on God's power and his understanding of God's promises that he found the courage to face giants, both physical and spiritual. Think about this. David was just a young shepherd, a boy, when he stood before Goliath. He had no armor, no sword, no military training, nothing that would equip him to fight a seasoned warrior. But what he did have was the knowledge that he was not alone. He knew that the God of Israel was with him, and that knowledge gave him the courage to do what no one else dared to do. He wasn't just fighting Goliath, he was fighting in the name of the Almighty God, and that made all the difference. In the same way, we are often called to face our own giants in life. Whether it's a financial crisis, a health issue, a relationship problem, or any other kind of challenge, we are faced with moments when we are overwhelmed, when it seems like the giants are too powerful to overcome. And in those moments, it's easy to feel small, powerless, and alone. But David's story reminds us that with God, no giant is too big. One of the most powerful aspects of David's courage is his deep understanding of the promises of God. When he faced Goliath, he didn't just rely on his experience as a shepherd, fighting lions and bears. He knew that God had already promised to give victory to Israel. He had seen God work in his life before, and he trusted that God would not abandon him in this moment. That trust was the foundation of his courage. But it's also important to see that courage and faith don't mean that we never experience fear, doubt, or weakness. In fact, it's often in our moments of vulnerability that we see the greatest manifestation of God's strength. David wasn't the strongest man, but his faith made him strong. And that's where the real power lies. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward in faith despite the fear. In David's life, we also see the importance of perseverance. Each battle he fought, each giant he faced, built upon the one before it. After defeating Goliath, he still had to contend with other giants like Ishbi-benob. Life didn't become easier for David after his victory over Goliath, but his faith grew stronger with each challenge. He didn't give up after the first victory. He kept trusting God, kept fighting, and kept standing firm. This is the lesson for us. Faith and courage are not one-time things. They are qualities that need to be nurtured, developed, and put to the test again and again. Every trial you face is an opportunity for your faith to grow, just as it did for David. Every giant you confront is an opportunity to trust in God's strength and to experience His power in ways you never imagined. And let's not forget the key component that kept David going through all of his trials: God's presence. Time and time again, David called upon the Lord. He didn't fight in his own strength. He fought in the strength that came from his relationship with God. And it was this relationship, this deep reliance on God, that was the true source of his courage. So, when you face your own giants, when life feels too big to handle, when the obstacles ahead seem insurmountable, remember David's lesson. Courage and faith are not just about trying harder, but about trusting God more deeply. It's about knowing that you don't have to face the giants alone. When you stand with God, nothing is impossible. David's story teaches us that faith in God will always be rewarded with victory. It may not always look the way we expect, and the giants may still be big, but if we walk by faith, just as David did, we will see the mighty hand of God at work, guiding, protecting, and delivering us through every battle. So stand firm, face your giants, and trust that with God, all things are possible,